Hi everyone, I'm Rachael Johns, bestselling Australian author of romance and women's fiction, and I'm so excited to be chatting to the Brenda Novak today on the Rights for Women Convo Couch. For almost as long as I can remember, I've been reading and loving Brenda's books and admiring her not only as a novelist but as a businesswoman. When the opportunity arose to read Brenda's newest book, Tourist Season, and interview her, I couldn't reply, please pick me fast enough. The only problem is this was way back in January, which feels a long time ago now. And I read the book, or rather devoured it in one sitting on my way back from Norfolk Island back then, and my memory is terrible. So I'm hoping I haven't forgotten too much. Good thing, though, is I won't be able to do spoilers. So thank you so much for joining me, Brenda.
I'm excited to be here.
Now, although I have stalked you online for many years, for anyone who may not know who you are, I'm just going to give a quick overview. Hopefully, I've got all these facts right. Brenda Novak is a New York Times bestselling author of over 75 books. She has been writing for over 25 years and began when she found her childcare provider drugging her children with cough syrup and Tylenol to get her to sleep. Horrified and not able to trust anyone with her babies anymore, she needed something to do while working from home. A diehard bookworm, Brenda decided to try her hand at writing fiction, and I'd say it worked out pretty well. That first book was a historical romance. In the last 25 years, Brenda has also written contemporary romance, romantic suspense, women's fiction, and more. She also runs a successful book club with over 25,000 members, has been very active in fundraising for diabetes. I think that's where I first heard about you years and years ago. I was an aspiring author, and you were running, what was it called? The
Brenda Novak online auction for diabetes research. Yeah,
Yes.
I did that for 10 years, and there were the most amazing opportunities there for aspiring writers, right?
Yes, I remember there was, hundreds of thousands of really good things on there. And obviously you raised a lot of money, so that's wonderful. And she recently, which was very exciting to watch, round trip to Australia, not Australia, I've written round trip to Australia, America, with her husband Ted in a vintage Airstream, ACCA, the book stream, while touring for her book, The Seaside Library, which I also loved, by the way. And you've done all this. You've also managed to birth and raise 5 children in almost that time. Brenda, I am absolutely in awe of you and trying not to totally fangirl here. In addition to talking to you about your fabulous new book, Tourist Season, there's so much I want to ask you about writing life and business. But so many interviews I've listened to start at the beginning. I've listened to many podcasts to do my research, and so I've heard your story, so people can go off and listen to how you got into it if they want. So I'm going to switch things up a bit and start in the now. So I'd love you to tell listeners about Tourist Season.
Tourist Season is a story that is, it's a beach read, but it also has a lot of other elements in it beyond the women's fiction romance / it's got a strong mystery in it as well. It's about a woman, Ismay, who has just passed the bar. She's going to be an attorney. She's excited to set out on her career, but she's been pushing so hard for so many years that she's ready for this break before it all starts. But her fiance, who is also going to UCLA with her, has to pass his tests. He's becoming a doctor and he's not quite finished. So he sends her on ahead of him to his family's very wealthy, lovely cottage on an island that is modeled after Nantucket. It's fictional. It's called Mariners. And while she is there, thinking she's just going to hang out on her own for a few days or weeks and soak up the sun and enjoy the quaint little town, a storm hits, and it's a terrible storm, almost hurricane level. And she's, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? And especially when the power goes out. So she's in this strange house clear across the country, wondering, what am I going to do? She's a starving student and was raised with parents who were very frugal, and her phone doesn't have the best charging capacity. So she's afraid she's going to lose that. The only flashlight she can find is dimming. It's already weak on batteries. And so she's like, how am I going to get through the night? So she goes in hunt of some type of candles or lighting, other flashlights, and she finds candles, but she has no matches to light them with. And so she thinks maybe my fiance might have matches in his room. I'm sure as a kid, he probably smoked pot once or twice. He's got to have something in there. So she goes into his old room and she's searching around. And because the house has recently been remodeled, things are mostly boxed up and there's not a lot of extra stuff around. She starts searching through those boxes, doesn't find anything. Thinks, maybe it's up in the closet. And she climbs up on him and she's feeling around and she feels a loose board that kind of intrigues her. And when she pulls that off, she pulls out a duffel bag filled with some shocking things that make her wonder if she ever really knew Remy, her fiance. And that's pretty much how the book starts out.
It's quite scary what she finds. So we won't give spoilers and stuff, but it does mean you've got the storm, you've got what she finds, you've got her being isolated. Although, as you said, it's a beach read, there's quite an element of almost thriller there in the beginning too.
A little gothic feel, maybe I would say, especially with the taciturn caretaker with the mysterious past who shows up to help her, that works for her fiance's parents. And so he's got a few secrets of his own, the big, strong, silent type. And so I just love the chemistry that they strike up. And even though he's the one that has, I won't give too much away, I guess. We can't do spoilers.
I think it's out. I'm not sure when this will be aired, but it's coming out in April, isn't it?
Yeah, April 2nd, just a few weeks away from now.
So I'm always fascinated by the process of other writers. So I'd love to know what comes first for you. Is it different for each book, or was it character, plot, setting, conflict? And yeah, is it different for each book, or is
it's the same for me? It's always the conflict. That's what first grabs my attention and tells me I have something to write about. To me, it's the engine that drives the story forward. So you can have great characters, but if they aren't facing anything interesting, nothing to overcome, then to me, it's a slow story. So I really like a high conflict story. I know Game of Thrones, how hugely popular that was. I don't think I'm alone. And there was just conflict, crazy conflict going on all the time. So same with Outlander, just tons of conflict. So I love to read that. I love movies that contain that, and I love to write that. So to me, it starts with the conflict, and then I try and figure out what characters would be most challenged by this conflict. And then I go to the characters, and the plot grows out of that.
Oh, that's really interesting, because yes, I think I probably struggle with conflict. Obviously, it's really important and I think about it, but I never thought about really thinking about first. I don't think. I often think characters for me come first, or the premise. And so that's really interesting. So apart from, so what, was it the conflict then? What was it about? So my question was, what was the first seed of inspiration for tourist season? But was it
conflict of trying to, like, the question of, do you ever really know somebody that you're very close to? And it's so easy for people, especially a sociopath or a psychopath, to compartmentalize. I'm not saying that we have one in the book or not, but I'm just saying that it's easy to feel as though you're very close to somebody. And then when you come up against certain questions, to wonder, do I really know this person? And also then, as I said, when the caretaker comes on the scene, you have to ask yourself the same question. Can I trust this person? What is he really like?
Yeah. Can you ever really trust anyone? So I'd love to know, we always talk, this is a writing podcast, and obviously one thing that's always fascinating is people's process as well. So you start with conflict, then what comes next? Are you in the industry? I don't think anyone who writes as prolifically as you, or who does this living, is a complete plotter or a complete pantser. I think you've got to be somewhere on the spectrum. I don't know if you agree with that, and I'd love to know.
I'm pretty much a pantser, so I wish I could plot more, but I just have to honor my process. I really admire those people who can plot. But if I know who did it or how it's going to turn out, somehow I'm a big mouth frog. I just let all that leak into my work, and it just falls flat. So I have to be surprised each day. I have to remain calm. And so my husband will even be getting to the end of maybe one that does have a suspense element, and he'll say, do you know who did it? I'll be like, nope. And he's like, you got to be kidding me. You're the one writing it. I'm like, I don't know yet. It just reveals itself to me. And you would think that would cause a lot of rewriting, but in all the novels that I've written, I've only had one book that I had any significant rewrites on, and it was because it was my third book, and it was because I had a warring plot rather than a subplot in there, and my editor pulled me aside. She said, this one's not really working. And I was so new that I was terrified, thinking, oh, can I fix it? So I lifted out those 70 pages dealing with that secondary character, and it forced me to focus more on the main character. And then I ended up using those 70 pages anyway to write the second book, and that's what started my first series. Even then, I was able to use that material. So I think your subconscious kind of launches out ahead of your conscious mind somehow, and that's what writer's block is to me, is I'll get stuck if I take a wrong turn, and the juncture that I needed to go back to isn't very far behind, maybe a couple of pages. So it just locks me down right away. And then I have to retrench, figure out where I'm going, and then start off in a different direction. When I figure out what's broken, then suddenly the writing just flows again. So I don't know why it works the way that it does for me. I went to a big convention where there was a big name male thriller writer who was giving a keynote speech, and he did a fabulous job, and he's very talented, but he said, if you don't plot, you don't write a good book. And I was like sliding down under the table because I'd already written probably 50 books by then. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've got it all wrong. And then you get in your head and you start trying to do it somebody else's way. And that just doesn't work for me. So I just had to realize whatever I'm doing intuitively is what I love to read. So hopefully there's enough other people out there who love that type of thing that I can get a readership going. So I've just had to trust my own process.
There is. I do agree with you. The subconscious is huge in writing. And I do feel like there's an element of magic if you just let the subconscious kind of go. I love hearing what you're saying, because pretty much that is exactly the way I write as well. And it's so easy sometimes to doubt that, but you have to trust it. You have to trust you've done it before. And I think, to me, you are a plotter in a way, but you're doing it in your head and intuitively. You're just thinking a little bit, like when you said with your writer's block, you've got to go back. You've gone so far in your head and you've stopped. If I think, because, so I have heard, like you, people say you have to be a plotter, but my favorite writers, so I'm not surprised at all that you are this way. Some really big names who I love as well as you, Marion Keyes, Leah Moriarty, they all are not plotters, and they all write intuitively. And I think that just allows the magic.
Like more women are pantsers than men.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's something
interesting
for that. Like it is interesting that our approach to work can be somewhat stereotypical between the sexes.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm wrong and I've only heard the ones that I've spoken to plot. But yeah, I find that just doing it intuitively. And when I start trying to plot, then I want to not waste that work, or I want to follow that path. Yeah. And you just have to be free to let your story grow into, and let your conflict grow. That was a hard lesson for me to learn too, is that a conflict gets stale and the emotions tied to it can get pretty tiresome for a reader if it doesn't grow and change. So even that has to be able to breathe and grow and change with the characters. And as long as you allow that, I feel like you have a good process.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fabulous. I had thought of something else to ask you then, but I've forgotten. So hopefully it'll remember, because it was something to do with what you just said, which was brilliant, I'm sure. I absolutely love how you work mystery and into your women's fiction. So obviously romance, drama, romantic elements, and mystery. And when did you first start? I've read a lot of your books. I can't remember what the first one. I think it was probably a Whiskey Creek book. Is that right?
Is that even interesting to somebody out of the country?
Yeah, no, it was fabulous. I don't know where I would have got it, but anyway, it was Whiskey Creek. Maybe back in the day, because we struggle sometimes in Australia to get books from the US. I'm sure I know for a fact, because my books are available here, and at the moment they're not very much available over there. So it's very much, but your trades come out here. But yeah, so I'm thinking maybe I got it from Book Depository years ago, when Book Depository was still.
I do think that all my books come out in the UK and Australia. They're just delayed. Yeah. So maybe we also had a print version probably of Whiskey Creek.
Actually, that's true. It probably came out with Harlequin on the, so maybe. Anyway, loved them. Read a lot of those series, and then read one of your suspenses, which I think was about sisters, which I absolutely loved. So I don't know when, so I'm asking you, when did you first start adding sort of mystery and crime elements into your books, and why?
I think, gosh, it goes way back to my super romance days. Dear Maggie was set here in Sacramento, and it contained a lot of suspense. I remember because I used to exercise down the river. Sacramento River has a trail, the bike trail that goes on there, and I would go down there to run or ride bikes, and I would scare myself because they had these killings happening along the bike trail where it's very wooded. And so I remember, oh my gosh, and that was very early on in my career. So I've always had a love for it. As a child, I remember reading something that I thought was really boring at the time. And I remember thinking, why don't they just make something happen? Like anything, just make anything happen. And so I think of that sometimes as a writer when I get stuck or I think something's going slow. And I remember, just make something happen. They just want something.
I'm writing that down to remind myself, just make something happen.
Just make something happen. Just do something. It was like whatever I was reading was like watching paint dry. I thought, I don't understand why the author doesn't make something just happen. So anyway, I've thought of that since then. And of course, suspense is a really easy way to carry a plot as well. It's hard to intertwine the two because then you get the romance and the suspense going at the same time. You have two arcs, and that's also very hard for marketing because then it's tough for your publisher to represent, is this suspense? Is this romance? And they also have their devotees. Like some romance people are like, I hate suspense. I don't want any blood or whatever. I never go gory at all. My stuff is more about the thrill and the mystery of it, the answering the questions, following the puzzle. And that's what I find intriguing more than like, how am I going to murder this person or whatever. I don't get into a lot of what I consider stuff that's darker, but there is a lot of dark elements that can run through my books. They always have deeper themes. I don't do like light romantic comedy. I wish I was funny that way, but I feel like those who are funny can pull it off naturally. If you're not naturally funny, then it's a quick way to write a pretty bad book if you're trying too hard.
I don't think you should worry. I think what you're doing is absolutely perfect. Your books are yours. I love also another US author, Mary Kay Andrews. So I know and both have really great romance and mystery in a sort of women's fiction book. And that is exactly what I love. So I think keep doing it, please.
I'm writing a book right now that I think you might like then because I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's called Down by the Sea, but it has some great mystery elements.
Down by the Sea. Okay. I follow you and
Well,
I
it's only a working title. I don't know if it'll be
Uh,
that title, but
oh, we should speak about that a bit, actually. I'm just going to diverse to that because I think a lot of aspiring writers who listen to this podcast, they are sometimes stuck on their title and then they hear, I know I heard years and years ago, oh, it'll be changed. And so I was like, oh, that's fine. I don't worry about my title. But now for me, a title is really important when I'm writing the book. It can really just make me remember what the themes are, what I wanted to do. And if I've got a great title, I find the book's easier to write than if I've got a title, I'm having to come up with a title. So tell me about your titles and whether you come up with them first, where they stay, just a bit about how you feel about titles.
yeah, sometimes they really do mean a lot to me. When my first book was published, I was really hopeful they were going to keep the title because that was actually the genesis of the idea for me. It was called Of Noble Birth, and it was an English historical, and of course it was about the caste system and what a person is truly noble as a condition of the heart has nothing to do with the pedigree. And so that was the theme of it. So I really wanted, and it starts out with this baby who is born without part of his arm. And he's rejected by his very wealthy Duke father and basically thrown away. The housekeeper steals him and runs away because she's so afraid that this man will end up killing him. So he is raised without the luxury that he would have had he been kept and loved. And so he's angry. And anyway, so he plots revenge against his father. And so that book title was important to me. And I was surprised they never once mentioned changing it. So my very first manuscript I wrote that I published with HarperCollins in 1999 kept that title. Since then, I've had both where I think what publishers, I don't know if your publisher does this too, but what mine will do is be like, oh, give me a list of titles you like. Then that way they can pick from your list and it makes you feel as if you were involved and you picked it. Sometimes they'll pick your least favorite and you're like, dang, why did I include that on my list? But they're pretty good about it. They have been, most of my titles I really like I loved The Secret Sister. I think that really hit the nail on the head for that book. I really feel like some of the ones for the new trilogy, these are just my last romance trilogy, straight romance.
I love the title for the first, especially Tallulah's Back in Town. Right.
Back in Town. I love that. And then The Talk of Coyote Canyon and The Messy Life of Jane Tanner. And so those titles, they helped me more with those. A lot of times I'll go in with one that I'll give them a list, but I think they came up with those and I helped a little, but it was mostly them. And so I really did like those. So sometimes it's just going back and forth because now too, marketing is a bigger part of the conversation than you may not know. You probably haven't been in the business as long as I have. I'm so much older. But back then it was marketing didn't have as heavy of a say. It was more editorial in the author. And now marketing weighs in really heavy. So sometimes it's more of a consensus. So like the Banned Books Club, I came up with that title. It'll be out in the fall. And I really liked it. So I was hoping they would keep it. And then sure enough, they did like it. So they never suggested changing it. So it just depends on how well they think it fits. I did have one, not the Seaside Library. It was called Somewhere on the Island. Yep. And we couldn't find one we liked. And they kept having me turn in lists and lists. And I had put Somewhere on the Island on my first list. And so it was rejected. And then we get down after, I don't know, several weeks of trying to wrangle over this. And I said, what about Somewhere on the Island? That's it. I was chuckling because I'm like, that was on the very first list, but mum was the word and they ran with it. And I loved that cover. To me, that's one of my best covers.
It's a gorgeous cover. I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm having a fight, not a fight. It's probably the wrong word, isn't it? About my title for my next book too, because yes, I don't think it's very exciting. The title.
What title do you want?
So I've got a series called, it's the Bunyip Bay series, but stupidly for me, the first 3 books, which came out quite a few years ago, I just put placeholder titles in. They were my third, 4th, and 5th books. And I had the first 2 books, the title stayed the same. And as I said before, I thought I'd heard so many people say that's quite rare. So I don't really know. So I called this Outback Dreams, Outback Blaze, and Outback Ghosts. Because the first is about someone's childhood dreams. The second is a fire. The third was a ghost. And I didn't think they would keep them. They did. And that was only supposed to be 3 books. But then I've just finished writing the 6th book. Quite a few years. I think the first one came out in 2013. So quite a few years separate. And I've done other stuff, but that series resonated. So we have to have Outback always at the beginning.
Yes, that is I think it's a great keyword for online searches, people's love of Australia. So I think you're smart to keep it in the title. I really do. It's a good marketing hook.
I want fling, she wants return. I think that's for it. Anyway, we've been
Outback Return. I like Outback Fling better too, I think.
I do too. Anyway, you've heard it here, everyone. Brenda Novak says a better title. Anyway, there's a few things there I'd love to talk about. You said about the changes in the industry. But quickly, I just a couple more things on your latest book, and I don't want to keep you forever, even though I could literally talk to you all day, I think. So you talk about conflict a lot, and I think your conflicts are great. You said it's a key ingredient for great fiction. I totally agree. I feel like it comes not naturally, but quite, as I said, I struggle with that sometimes. It seems like that's one of the things that you start with. So do you have any other tips for writers on how to create great conflict? And do you ever worry that the conflict is so good you won't be able to write yourself out of it?
Yeah, I think that some writers are afraid of conflict, and I understand why, because there's a lot of readers who don't want a big conflict.
Yeah.
They don't want to go there. They don't want to feel those really scared or really heartbroken or really, even Kristen Hanna's gorgeous novels. I've had people be like, oh no, I can't read that because it's just too heart-wrenching. They just want something lighter. So everybody has their loves, but if you try and write for everybody else, you'll homogenize your work to the point it won't resonate with anybody. So I'm a pleaser, and I always want to make the people around me happy. And so that was kind of a hard thing for me to get over, because if somebody gave me negative feedback, I'd try and adjust for it. And then you get negative feedback somewhere else, and I'd try and adjust for it. If you listen to everyone else, like I said, you won't get anywhere, and you'll end up with nothing that's worth reading. So I finally just learned to turn off my internal editor, because when you do listen to that criticism, your internal editor gets so loud, you just freeze up and you can't write anything. So I just now give myself a license to write what I really love. And I just hope that it'll resonate with enough people, because there are those that I know, especially because the kind of covers they give me, this one isn't quite as sweet looking, but a lot of times they'll give me sweet looking covers, like a Rayanne Thang novel or a W. Macomber novel or a Susan Mallory novel, all of which are much lighter than what I write. I write a heavier conflict. And I feel like if that isn't adequately represented in the cover, then we draw the wrong kind of reader, which makes it harder to build readership, because they're going, oh, I wasn't in for this. Like I even had somebody on my tour last year held up the cover of the Seaside Library. She goes, would you ever have thought that there was a murder in here? So obviously it was sending the wrong signals. And I had to fight hard to get the cover that was there. The other one they wanted was even sweeter. I think it would have been way worse. I misled people way worse. I just feel like, yeah, it's something that as an aspiring writer, you just have to find your own voice and what you love, and you have to just charge toward it, not timidly. You just let go and you charge toward it and hope that it'll resonate with enough other people, because you can't be anybody other than you are anyway. So why try?
Do you read your reviews?
I do. They used to slay me if there was any bad ones. Early on, my first book, I remember when my very first bad review, and my husband came in, he's like, what's wrong? And you could tell I was just destroyed. And I'm like, read this. But since then I have gotten a little, not that nobody likes a good review. It doesn't make a bad review. It doesn't make you feel good, but I have gained some perspective, and I just realized, okay, I've identified somebody who is not a good reader shouldn't pick up my books because they don't like them. So they need to go on and find what fits them, and I'll go on and find a reader that fits me.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Before we ask you a few questions about business and your wonderful longevity, the name, I wasn't sure how to say it. You said Ismay. Is that right? Ismay?
Yes, Ismay.
Yeah. So do you keep a list? Because you've written a lot of books, right? So you've got 75, more than that now, I'm guessing. How many books is it now?
In the pipeline, I have 76, 77. I think I have 77. No, the third one came out. I think I have 78 out. This will be 79. And then I'll have 80 to start.
So 80 books, right? That's a lot of names.
That's a lot of...
using the same one, and have you got a list somewhere? How do you choose a name? All that sort of stuff.
I should get a list, because I'm afraid I'll start reusing.
Oh, you're like me. I've only got 20, and I think I should get a list, and I'm too lazy. I haven't done that yet.
I'm sure I have reused some throwaway characters, which I'm not too worried about, because all of us know more than one Debbie or more than one John or more than. So I'm not too worried. If I just don't want to repeat hero and heroine and major characters, villain. So I try and choose ones that I've never really thought of before. Ismay was a new name to me. Tallulah, I loved. I picked that up I read an article about Elon Musk dating an actress named Tallulah, and I just love the way that name rolls off your tongue, Tallulah. So I don't know, I just wanted to use Tallulah. So I had not used Ismay or Tallulah before, so I felt safe there, but I should probably make a list.
Yeah. I'm guessing, our chat so far, that your heroes come pretty naturally to you and they form on the page and stuff. Do you do any specific, because I was going to say that I shouldn't say who, I'm not going to say who the name is. It's pretty, but yeah, because of the fact that there's a bit of mystery. But I loved the guy in the end who is the love interest.
Okay.
Do you do any character work before you start, or how do they come to you?
That's a hard question to answer, because they just come in my imagination. a lot of times I'll picture a tone. Like for this one, I was craving a book with that Gothic type tone, that windswept island type thing. So even though it's a beach read, it has just that hint of Gothic going through it with that strong silent caretaker. So I just wanted somebody that would have a lot to hide and have been hurt in his own way, and had to get tough in order to survive and swallow that pain. And so when he meets her and is able to heal completely, there is that change as you go through the novel, and you get that sense of everything is right now, everything clicks, everything feels good, and they've overcome this terrible challenge.
Yeah, no, it was great. Now, you mentioned Mariners Island is a fictional island based on Nantucket. So I was going to ask you that. So that's great. But is there I'm actually just about to write an island book set on Norfolk Island, which I mentioned at the beginning, which is off the coast of in the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of that side of the country. My brain's gone now. I can't remember any of the locations in the country. But was there any difficulties writing an island book? Like, or challenges?
No, I loved it because it's so much like a small town book, right? Where everything's insular, everybody knows everybody else. And it's a lot of fun because I actually went to Nantucket to interview Nancy Thayer for my book group on Facebook. I feature another author in the months that I don't have a release. And many times we'll travel to their house so that my readers can get a more intimate view of where they live and what it's like. And then they get to see, so they got to travel to Nantucket with me. Wow. And just being there made me able to picture that type of an island so much more vividly, obviously, because I had an example. And we went to the Whaling Museum, and it's such a lovely island. I really loved it, but I didn't want to be tied down to exactly what was there. I wanted to be able to add certain elements. And so that's why I created a third island like Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket in the same general area. So it would have a similar history and look, but then I was able to do my own library.
I love that about fictional towns based on real places. Now, after writing books, I'd love to know if you find writing easier or harder than you began, and how you keep coming up with. No, let's not do that, because you've just talked enough about this. I don't want to go over, and you have definitely told me about coming up. So just, is it easier or harder? What are the challenges now that weren't the challenges when you began?
I think each book is always harder because you're wanting to write a better book than you've ever written before. So in a way, that never goes away. So I don't know if I'd say it's harder, but that desire to achieve more, to make it better, continually fuels you. It does get easier. I remember when I first started writing, and it's like what Malcolm Gladwell says, right? He said it takes 10,000 hours at anything to become an expert at it. So once you've written as many hours as I've written, the language comes easier. Trying to formulate the words around what I'm trying to convey gets easier. I used to really struggle with transitions. That has gotten easier.
Yeah, transitions. I agree.
Hard. I remember when I first started writing, that was probably the hardest element of writing for me. And I just could not figure out my transitions. And so that now you get your voice, you get in your habit, that all gets much easier. But am I turning out tons more pages a day because it's now so easy? No. Still takes just as long. So it can't be that much easier. So certain elements of it get easier. Any creative work, you always want it to be your best. It's always going to be a challenge.
And of course, now I'm guessing when you started, I know even when I started, there was no Instagram. I think Facebook was a tiny baby, which wouldn't have been when you started. Did you have
internet? Started when
internet was just what I call a baby. And so now obviously there's a whole lot of other things on your time that you wouldn't have had. You had little kids then, so they're a big thing on your time. But
social media, when I had little kids, because it did come on, I have 5 of them, so they range over 10 years. They paralleled a large part of my career, because I got my first book published when my son was like 1.
Yeah, wow. And you've got a lot more on your time now. How do you manage that and still write? So do you have some sort of routine, compartmentalized? Because you still write 3, at least often 2 or 3, 4 books a year.
Yeah. I'm going down to 2 books because I'll only be doing trades. Yep. Without mass market, you don't publish as frequently, and publishers are backing away from mass market because of self-pubbing. They've pretty much relinquished that area. They can't compete with somebody who can sell a book for 99 cents. They have to pay rent, they have to pay editors, they have to pay distribution. They just can't compete. So they're conceding mass market to self-published authors, and they're trying to focus on trades and hardcovers where they can still make a little bit of money.
So you're going to be doing 2. So do you have specific writing times in the year? Do you write in your morning? How's your day?
I pretty much have to be regimented. Like, I can't just procrastinate. Like, I have a friend who's, I don't even start till 3 weeks before my deadline, and then I just sit down and nonstop, go in my room and just write the book. And I'm like, I would freeze up. I would be panic stricken. The pressure would be so high, I wouldn't be able to create.
Yeah.
So I'm somebody that has to lope along and just keep working and hit my daily goals. Also, because I was a mother of 5, I didn't have the option of, procrastinating and then just turning my family off for 2 weeks. They still needed mom to get them off to school and take them their cheer stuff and go to their games and sports practices and dinner. And so I had to really work while they were at school only. And then I was mom. So I got pretty disciplined in that, and I've kept with it because I still, when my husband gets home at night, I want to spend some time with him, and on the weekend we take off. So I pretty much just work, but they're long days. I work all day, probably 7 to 7, 12-hour days, doing social media, running the book group, writing, and probably as much time or more time doing the online stuff as writing, to be honest with you.
I know, I think that's stuff that's obviously takes a whole load of time now that it just didn't when you started. But I'm guessing, you wouldn't do as much as you do if you didn't enjoy it.
The book group has become, many of those people have become friends.
Yeah.
They're not just readers, they're good friends, and they're just warm and wonderful to each other and to me and to my family. For instance, tonight we're playing bingo, and they call Ted Bingo Ted, and he's been sending out little packs that he signs, and it's just hilarious. And they send him dad jokes that he gives, and we all get together once a month for bingo. And so just fun things like that we have incorporated in the book group, because it's the book box subscribers that provide enough income for Alexa to be able to help me run the book group. Without that, we wouldn't be able to have one. Yeah. So we are super grateful to them, but we also try and do many free things for those who are library readers or can't afford it or whatever. It's not all about the money. It's just trying to get enough to make it all work for everybody. And so, we have a great time with them, and they were really wonderful to support me on my book stream tour. Probably gave out 2,000 hugs on that tour. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, the book stream looked amazing. I'm very jealous. I hadn't heard of what an Airstream was. We don't have them really in Australia or anything like that. So
I would think you would have them. They're hugely popular here, and they've been around for a long time.
I'm sure we have a few that people have, but it's not a thing.
Culture here now.
Yeah. I was going to ask you one final thing, because I don't want to. Oh no, I was tell you a secret quickly. It's a confession more. Your book club. How many years have you been going with your book club?
I think almost 8. In August, it'll be 8 years.
So one day, it was just before Christmas, about 6 years ago, I must have seen you doing your book club stuff or whatever. And I'm like, I can do that. So I started an online booking. It's mostly Australian. So I've got the Rachael Johns online book club. We only have 6,000 members.
Well, it's more about how dedicated the members are than the number.
Yeah, no, but you inspired me for that community aspect, and it has been amazing. Exactly what you said in terms of people have met through there. I said they're probably 95% Australians, but they've met through there. They've created, I'm sure it's the same as you, offshoot groups, and they come to events wearing Rachael Johns book club things that they've made and stuff like that. And we actually had our first in-person retreat last year with 100 people in this little German town in South Australia, which is beautiful. We're going to the Gold Coast this year. So thank you, because none of this would have happened without you inspiring me to do the same. It's the same, not exactly.
Because these kinds of groups, they really attract the best kind of people. Readers are the best kind of people, because when you read, you learn empathy, right? Because you're changing your perspective with each character, so you can see things from everybody's point of view, and it creates a really warm, wonderful person. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing more, and then I'll let you go, I think, because you've got a busy day. You've already done one podcast today. Advice for someone wanting to grow not only to grow as a writer, because as we said, like a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are new writers as well as established and emerging, but it is very different world now than when you began. It said even when I began. So but also if people want to create like the kind of, you've got a writing business, as you said, there's a lot of elements to there's the books, and you do just as much on your online book club and all the merch you've got like an empire, Brenda Novak empire. What's your advice to people who want to do something else apart from the writing?
Promotion, maybe?
It's so hard these days, as you said. Marketing is a much bigger thing for the author, as well as, I think one of the myths, and I can see when I watch how much you do and how much many other authors who I respect do, and even myself, one of the myths I think in publishing is that if you're indie published or self-published, you have to do so much more marketing, whereas we have to do a lot of marketing in the trad world. So yeah, have you got any advice for building a brand?
I do think that a lot can be learned from the indies. They've had to do guerrilla warfare, right? So they have to.
I've got some really good friends who are indies, and I agree that I watch what they do too. Yeah.
They're clever. They're very clever. They have to be adept at it. They have to be the innovators because
Yeah.
they've got it. This when they came on the scene, it was odds were stacked against them because it was hard to get a voice. They didn't have the major pull of a publisher. They weren't out on bookstore shelves. They were really working at a deficit, and some of them have just been brilliant, and many of them have been brilliant in how they have built a readership. And so my hat goes off to them.
Lucy Score is a really good example, and Megan Quinn. Like I read mostly contemporary, so I know there's a lot of others in the romantic scene, but yeah, like I agree. There's some who started indie who have just been, and so I wasn't getting at indies, but I think we do have to do a reasonable amount of marketing and promo now.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. I feel like it's easy for trad authors to feel as though their publisher should handle it. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of those who felt like the publisher was handling it fell asleep thinking, oh, all I need to do is write my books. Yeah. And they were super prolific. So they thought, okay, I'll just keep writing these books and I'll focus here and my publisher will handle it. And the publisher was handling it until they weren't, until things fell apart to the point where, hey, if you don't have your own community, people supporting you, we suddenly can't get your books on the shelves. The mass market shelves are dwindling. And so it's interesting how some of them, I think, did fall asleep thinking, no, we're in a different world and we don't have to do that much. But you're right. We have to fight just as hard to establish a brand because I always picture it like a marketplace where everybody's standing in the street. If you think of it that way, everybody you know is selling something. If they're out there, buy mine, whether it's a book or a toothbrush or solar or whatever it is, it's just a cacophony of voices that each of us have to weed out day in and day out. So I just feel like we have to continue to innovate and find creative ways. And it's also really changed.
Yeah, I don't know how you're doing it, but you seem to be doing a pretty good job. So thank you for all of us.
Like you're doing a fabulous job yourself. 6,000 members, diehard members are what counts. So good for you.
No, they're fabulous people. So it's really been great to get to know all the readers through that. So there's so many good elements, I think, of social media, but it can also be a lot of noise, isn't it? Anyway, I just want to thank you so much today for talking to me about your new book, Tourist Season. Everyone who's listening, you should definitely get out there, get Tourist Season, but the good thing is you don't have to wait. If this comes out before Tourist Season comes out, which it might, you don't have to wait because Brenda has 75, 76, 77 books already out there and they're all equally as good as the last one. So go out, read Brenda's books and learn from her because I don't think the best way to learn about writing is to read.
Absolutely true. Yep. If you learn by example, and most people do, that's the best way to do it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have had the chance to get to know you and learn more about your writing. And I got to go look up your stuff.
Thank you. Bye.